Once Upon a Time was one of my favorite shows as a kid, but that wasn't really by choice. The very complex blend of action, comedy, family drama, and romance all mixed into like a weird fairy tale soap opera meant that it was an intersection point for all the different members of my family. We all kind of liked different things, but there was one thing that we could share, and it was this show, even though we all had different gauges based on how much we liked or disliked it. And as for me, I liked it a fair bit. I don't even think it's weird to say that, considering I watched this mostly around the same time I was watching My Little Pony, and, you know, the intersection between those two things is pretty clear and direct. And much like with My Little Pony, I've wanted to revisit this show for a while, and so I just kind of started watching it, and I remembered why this show was just so easy to watch. There's really not a lot going on in terms of, like, craft elements when you're constructing a show. It's just kind of, like, on. And don't worry, I'm going to stop myself now because I don't want to do a whole critique of the show just yet. Rather, like what the title says, I want to go episode by episode and just kind of judge these individually. And I could make up so many reasons about how the episode structure is the heart and soul of what can make some good moments in the show work, but the real reason, I just want to talk about a show with serialized episodes again. Like, can we get back to the style of TV production where episodes can be their own self-contained story that kind of like can like string along in a large narrative, but also, you know, have like individual stories inside of it. Kevin Feige and Disney Plus did irrevocable damage to like all of TV by creating this idea that every show needs to be like 6 episodes and just one long extended movie. That's not what TV is meant for. Okay, I'm gonna stop gushing about how much I prefer serialized TV, and look, let's just jump into the summary. Once Upon a Time was an ABC soap opera that aired back in 2011 and ran until 2017? It wasn't even that long ago, and this is literally on Disney Plus. Kevin, what are you guys doing? Once Upon a Time is all about a little town in Maine called Storybrooke, where all kinds of classic fairy tale characters live in a modern world, but don't know that they're fairy tale characters. The evil queen from Snow White cursed everybody to come to this land, and now it comes down to this new character, Emma, who's the daughter of Prince Charming and Snow White, to save the day and get everybody's memories back. The show evolves and changes a lot as it goes along, and we'll definitely talk about that, but for now, let's just get into Season 1. Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot. This series begins with a flashback, actually, to the events that preceded the show, featuring a recently poisoned Snow White getting saved by Prince Charming because of true love's kiss. You know how the Disney movie goes. They then smash cut into getting married, and we quickly learn that this adaptation is cutting the whole evil queen gets crushed by a rock and eaten by vultures. You know, part of the cartoon movie. The evil queen Regina, because yes, the characters do have real names, and I'll probably refer to them by their real names because that's usually what they go by in this show, shows up to interrupt the wedding, and we get some just beautiful CGI walking on a green screen floor. At the very least, I will say this does set a bar in terms of the VFX clearly not being able to match the ambitions of the creators. Probably just gonna have to have a whole, you know, bad VFX counter, but we'd be here all day if we did that. Just take note of all the times there's bad green screen. Regina shows up and is basically just like, yeah, you guys can be happy today, but I'm working on a curse. I'm gonna send you all to a horrible land. Then we get a pretty cool transition where it's revealed that this flashback is actually just a fairy tale that this kid Henry's reading in a storybook while on a train. He arrives at some random apartment building in Boston, and then we swiftly transition from him over to our actual protagonist, Emma, and then we get just some of the best 2011 dialogue.
You, Emma, are by far the sexiest, friendless orphan that I have ever met.
This is a pretty interesting scene, though, since it begins and we think Emma's going on a date with this guy, but then it turns out she's actually a bail bondswoman, and she's just here to catch this guy because he ran away from the law. A real Darman episode there, I know. Afterward, Emma goes back to her place, and we see she actually wasn't lying about saying that today was her birthday, or the fact that she's a friendless orphan, or, excuse me, I'm sorry,
The sexiest, friendless orphan.
Emma lights a candle, blows it out, we don't hear what she wishes for, but then suddenly this kid shows up on her doorstep, and...
My name's Henry. I'm her son.
Yeah, and that's where the whole main crux of this whole show kicks in, the idea that this kid Henry is the baby that Emma gave away years ago. We'll learn all about this in a couple episodes down the line, but for right now, all that really matters is Henry's here and he's taking her back home to his hometown of Storybrooke. They hop in her little yellow bug, which is important. Remember this car. This car is very important. At the same time, we flash back to the whole fairy tale timeline where Snow White and Prince Charming are worried about whether or not the Queen's threat is actually credible, and it's especially more nerve-wracking since it's also revealed that Snow White's pregnant. Oh yeah, I should probably mention this now, but this show often, and by often I mean in almost every episode, does the whole like Lost thing where it has like two storylines going on at once. One is the main storyline and one is the flashback. To make this simple, I'll just refer to every event going on at the present time, usually in Storybrooke with our current characters as the A-plot, and anything going on in the Enchanted Forest or during the fairy tale timeline or any time in the past as the B-plot. Oh yeah, the Enchanted Forest is just the name of the land the fairy tale characters lived in before they came to Storybrooke. Try and keep up with the names. Anyway, Snow and Prince Charming decide to go to one of their captured prisoners who turns out to be Rumpelstiltskin, who is just... he is just putting his full pussy into this performance.
Fear not, for I can ease your mind. But it's gonna cost you something in return. Soon you'll all be in a prison, just like me, only worse. Your prison, all of our prisons, will be time while the Queen celebrates victorious at last.
Look, I'll just get it out of the way right now, but this show is very often heavily carried by Lana Parrilla and Robert Carlyle as Rumpelstiltskin and the Evil Queen. Not only are they some of the best written characters, but they go for it. Regardless, Charming and Snow interrogate Rumpel about whether or not Regina has actually made this supposed curse. Naturally, Rumpelstiltskin wants to make a deal, so they trade the name of their baby for the information they're looking for, even though they try and go back on the deal originally, but Snow White relents and says that their baby's name is Emma. Back in the present, Emma and Henry arrive in Storybrooke, meet Henry's shrink, Archie, who Henry claims is actually Jiminy Cricket, but doesn't remember that he's Jiminy Cricket, and then they meet Regina, who turns out to not only be the mayor of Storybrooke, but also Henry's adoptive mother, so this is where we get into a lot of the melodrama, and wait a minute. Wait, it can't be, zoom in a little bit, is that?
I thought it was you.
No, somebody tell him to stay. Tell him to stay on the show. It's only dark clouds ahead for you, Jamie Dornan. This is Graham the sheriff, who helps get Henry into bed, and then Regina and Emma have a confrontation. The scene's pretty good overall. Again, Lana Parrilla is amazing throughout this entire show. And there's even some really good subtle camera movements. I like that when Emma sits down, the camera pans down to follow her, which feels like a natural camera movement, but it also pans down to reveal the apples sitting on the table. One of my favorite things to do with pieces of media is approach them as if I'm a blind watcher and that I don't know anything about the premise or even what it's about. As a blind watcher, this is a very subtle way of connecting the B and A plot, since by this point we don't really understand what the fairy tale characters have to do with the real world other than some stuff that Henry says. And since Regina isn't really being openly antagonistic towards Emma, there's really no credibility to go off of from what Henry says, and then bam, apples. And you know who else liked apples? Ryuk. Oh, and I guess, you know, the Evil Queen too. Regardless, Emma drops Henry off, is ready to leave town, but then swerves out of the way of a wolf and crashes her little beetle. She meets the sheriff in jail after she was arrested for supposed drunk driving, and also meets another prisoner there, Leroy, who's just like so clearly grumpy, it's not even funny. Back during the B plot, all of the fairy tale characters get together to figure out how they're gonna deal with the Queen's curse, and we get more of this. Hold on to your butts, folks. VFX throughout this whole series are going to be something special. The Blue Fairy, Geppetto, and Pinocchio work together to create this tree that's apparently going to be able to send other people to this other world the curse is going to take them to. The plan is to put Snow White in there with their baby, since she's supposed to be the savior that's going to break the curse. The only problem is, right as soon as they're getting done with the tree, Snow White goes into labor. Back in the A plot, Emma and Regina learn that Henry's run away again, and they have to go get help from his teacher, Mary Margaret, who looks pretty familiar. Mary Margaret is able to tell them about this storybook that she gave Henry that's apparently influencing all these ideas that he has about everybody being fairy tale characters. Then she points Emma towards this playground where she thinks Henry's hiding out at, and guess what, he's there. They then have an actually pretty nicely written and performed confrontation about what it means to be an orphan and abandoned. This is even more interesting because during the B plot, it shows Snow White giving birth to Emma, and they realize they have to put Emma into the tree by herself since, you know, it can only take one person. So while Emma's talking about feeling like she was abandoned, we get to see her actual parents having to deal with abandoning her. Nevertheless, Henry and Emma more or less make up, and she basically affirms that she kind of wants to be in Henry's life, so she's thinking about staying. Meanwhile, during the B plot, Regina's curse comes into full effect as Prince Charming's also stabbed and almost killed. Regina taunts Snow, and then Snow taunts Regina since Emma was able to make it into the tree safely. And then Regina says the iconic line.
A place where the only happy ending will be mine.
Yeah, I get used to hearing people talk about happy endings. That's like a big thing that keeps coming back. Regardless, we go back to the A plot where Regina threatens Emma.
I will destroy you if it is the last thing I do. I shall destroy your happiness if it is the last thing I do.
Okay, I know like dialogue callbacks are like writing 101, but I kinda just appreciate when you can do something subtle like this. Okay, maybe subtle's the wrong word. Emma decides she wants to stay, begins to move into a hotel, and gets Freddy Fazbear jump scared by Robert Carlyle. Then we end the episode with the main clock at the top of Storybrooke starting to work again, which serves as a metaphor for the fact that time is beginning to restart again. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention earlier, but the whole point of this town is that like time stop, which is why nobody ages. A weird facet of the Queen's curse, blah 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 blah. It's the same way that we can have the fairy tale actors and their real life counterparts be, you know, the same actors and not have to explain them growing up. And then the episode ends. This was actually a very surprisingly strong episode of television. I'm obviously looking through rose-tinted glasses, but I really wanted to watch this show to see if it held up. Not really to see if it's as good as I remember, but more so just kind of see if I remember it at all. After watching this pilot, it's clear why this show ran for as long as it did. There are a lot of good and bad qualities that permeate multiple episodes, and I think this one's really good at introducing what the show will do very well. Robert Carlyle and Lana Parella's performance, the co-parenting message between Emma, Regina, and Henry, A and B plots that are supplemental to each other, and an endlessly reusable and original premise. Say what you want about what this show became, but that central premise of fairy tale characters in the real world that don't know they're fairy tale characters is still a very good premise to write a show around. That's without even mentioning that every actor in this show is absolutely selling the soap opera dialogue and the melodrama. Look, it might be a little early to call this, but I'm gonna give the pilot a 10 out of 10. And so you know what that means. We can only go downhill from here. Season 1, Episode 2. The Thing You Love Most. This episode begins where the pilot leaves off on. Henry's in his room and he smiles once he sees the clock tower working again. Then there's a really weird scene where Regina accosts him about a page being missing from the storybook. This whole scene makes sense since, you know, it's the evil queen trying to stop her son from snooping into her business, but it's really weirdly phrased. Again, the premise of the evil queen adopts the grandson of Snow White is a very cool idea. But one of the things I'm going to try and call out is all of the times where Regina is way too actively villainous in the first season. In the later seasons, Regina becomes a much more complex character because she's torn between the light and the dark. You know, her son wants her to be good, but she was also the evil queen for a while. And I know that's not really season 1's fault since she's clearly designed to be the antagonist of this. It's just a big difference that I need to call out because sometimes it's very unrealistic. Regina being antagonistic towards Emma or the townspeople is perfectly fine, but her being like this to her son is just not it. Anyway, then we move into the B plot where we get an actually really cool flashback where we get to see what Regina was doing in the days leading up to the curse. We find out Regina had to go to Maleficent to get the curse, and she just really needed a different costume. It's fine in the later seasons. Like, I mean, it's not great, but it works. Anyway, Regina and Maleficent fight, and Regina takes the curse and then goes back to sulk. She summons a bunch of random supposed bad guys who never come back in any way to all share in the glory of this curse, which requires you to sacrifice something that you love. For Regina, that's her prized horse, which she throws the heart of into the fire? I'm telling you, we'd never get shit like this on Disney Plus again. Anyway, the curse doesn't work, and we get a really cool transition back to the A-plot. Regina's working in her garden, and she meets with the local newspaper editor who's...
My name is Gustavo, but you can call me Sus.
Okay, look, I already did the whole freak out thing with Jamie Dornan. I'm not going to do this again. But yes, that is Giancarlo Esposito, and yes, this was right after he had his face-off with Walter White. Honestly, that's just a legendary acting moment right there. I'd love to be that, you know, going from playing one of TV's greatest villains to onto the set of the Disney fairy tale soap opera show. To me, that's probably what heaven is. Anyway, we learn this is where the main plot of the episode is going to kick in, where Regina basically begins this whole smear campaign to try and get Emma kicked out of town. This is doing double duty since we know that Regina, as the evil queen and as Henry's mother, doesn't want Emma in their lives. She doesn't like Emma because she doesn't want her to take Henry's attention away from her, but she also doesn't like Emma because she's the savior and could possibly break the curse. This whole cat and mouse game is really what the whole episode is about, and we see that later on when Emma tries to go get Henry's psychiatric files from his therapist, Archie, who's, you know, the guy that was Jiminy Cricket. Regina then intimidates Archie into saying that Emma broke into his office and stole them, so that when Jamie Dornan goes to her hotel room and finds her with the file, he has cause to arrest her. Regina tries to spin a whole narrative about Emma being a con woman since she had some legal problems when she was a teenager and she was just arrested by Jamie Dornan. Luckily, Henry's an absolute giga chad and doesn't believe her, and also Emma's saved because she's bailed out by Mary Margaret. Emma then goes to Regina's house and just has the best moment of revenge.
Smoking sexy style!
We go back to the B-plot where we see Regina is contemplating why the curse didn't work, so she decides to go visit Rumpelstiltskin, who informs her the whole sacrifice the thing you love most part is very important, and that sacrificing something like your prized horse isn't exactly gonna cut it. Rumpelstiltskin only gives this information because Regina agrees to give him a very good and rich life in the new land that they go to, which explains why Mr. Gold kind of runs the entire town of Storybrooke. Oh yeah, I don't know if I mentioned it before, but yeah, this is Mr. Gold. He's the real-world version of Rumpelstiltskin, and he's kind of like a pawnbroker who owns a lot of real estate. Also, there's a whole thing throughout this whole season about whether or not he actually doesn't remember the fact that he's Rumpelstiltskin. Anyway, back in the A-plot, Regina strikes back as the hotel manager, who's actually the granny from Little Red Riding Hood, kicks Emma out of her room because of some bogus rule about not having ex-cons. However, right when it looks like Emma's at rock bottom, Regina seems to call a truce. They meet at Regina's house and seem to come to an understanding that they both really want to be in Henry's lives, but through Regina's consistent probing, she gets Emma to confess that she doesn't actually believe anything Henry's saying about the whole fairy tale thing. It's just unfortunate that Henry was walking into the room at that exact moment. The whole truce was actually just a con that Regina was using to get Emma to confess this in front of Henry so that Henry would lose all faith in her. And can I just say, Lana Parrilla slays in this scene.
I know that my son comes to my office every Thursday at precisely 5 p.m. so I can take him for dinner before his therapy session. Of course I did. I'm his mother.
It's what she deserves.
Then we move back into the B-plot where we see Regina contemplating what she has to do because it's clear she knows what she has to sacrifice, but she seems unwilling to do it. This is a really great scene that shows a lot of humanity inside of Regina, especially given what we're coming off of. Regina contemplates if it's worth it to enact the dark curse given what she'll lose, but she ultimately decides to do it and rips the heart out of her butler, who we quickly learn is actually her father. You know, the last real human connection she has. Goes and enacts the dark curse and also visits the grave of her now deceased father, who we see is named Then she gets in her carriage and presumably goes and sees Snow White for the end of the first episode. Getting to the end of the A-plot, Emma eventually does find Henry distraught and depressed at Archie's place. Emma confesses that she does actually believe about the curse, she just is trying to trick Regina because the whole point of the curse is that Regina can't know that they're trying to solve it. As a viewer, we can tell she's lying about this, and this is actually a really cool thing that we see pop up in a lot of episodes. Emma and a lot of other characters often talk to Henry about the curse in a way that that would lead you to think that they believe it, but it's actually them trying to understand a lot more about Henry. Archie often talks about how Henry's young and traumatized, so he processes life through fairy tales, so Emma wants to connect with him on that. It's a very subtle and nice way of portraying child psychology. Anyway, the episode wraps up with Regina and Mr. Gold having a little confrontation where Regina tries to suss out if Gold is pretending to not have his memories. And as a viewer, it's actually genuinely hard to tell, most of it due to Robert Carlyle's amazing performance. This episode was a pretty good continuation of the first episode and has a lot of the good things that was present there, but it kind of just feels like more of the same. I think I'm probably gonna have to give it an 8 out of 10. Season 1, Episode 3. Snow Falls. Yay, we finally get a Snow White episode. This episode actually begins in the B-plot where we see how Prince Charming and Snow White met. Snow White robs his carriage and he hunts her down only to find that she's
You're a girl.
She gets away, and then Charming delivers an iconic line.
You can't hide from me! Wherever you are, I will find you!
Back in the A-plot, Mary Margaret goes on a date with this guy who will never be important later, and definitely isn't the strangest fairy tale character they added to the show. It doesn't really go so well though, because Snow White's such a turbo virgin. The next day, Mary Margaret goes to the hospital to take care of some patients as a volunteer. There, Mary Margaret sees Henry reading his storybook to a comatose man who we quickly realize is Prince Charming. Yeah, so you see, since Charming was kind of shish kebabbed before the curse took over, when he got transported to this world, he was in critical condition, and ever since they traveled here, he's just kind of been in a coma. Henry tries using the story we saw in the prologue as a way to wake him up and remind him about Snow White, which he then tells to Emma. Emma and Mary Margaret decide it ought to be fun to humor him, so she takes the storybook to the hospital and reads the fairy tale to him, only to get a response out of him. She tries to get the douchey guy's attention, who we quickly learn is named Dr. Whale and is like the only doctor in the small town. I love how sitcoms like this work. Any of these early 2010 shows, there was like one doctor in like the whole city. Regardless, he pulls a sneaky maneuver and warns somebody who's definitely not Regina about the fact that the coma patient is waking up. After that, we swiftly transition back to the B-plot where we see Snow White taking the jewels that she stole from Prince Charming only to get Ewok'd. Charming threatens to turn her over to the queen, but decides he just wants his ring back that was inside the jewels so that he can propose to the bitchy girl that was in the carriage with him. And the two then embark on a journey to, go and get what they mutually want. Snow White wants gold to leave the kingdom so the queen will stop hunting her, and Charming wants the ring that we find out belonged to his mother, not only because of sentimental value, but it's also important to securing this marriage that'll be a big unity between their kingdoms. And obviously they fall in love through this little adventure. Yeah, I think this was right around the time I started being obsessed with enemies to lovers. Back in the A-plot, we learn John Doe, the coma guy, has mysteriously disappeared. Both A and B plots follow a pretty simple trek that's honestly not that interesting to follow. The A-plot is all about Jamie Dornan and Emma trying to find John Doe, while Henry tries to convince Mary Margaret that John Doe's actually looking for him because, the whole Snow White Prince Charming thing. And after about the third time Henry had to say again that John Doe's in love with her and she rebuffs it, I was kind of getting done with this dynamic. Back in the B-plot, it's kind of what you would expect. Charming and Snow don't like each other. She tries to escape. He saves her, and then, there's some new respect between them. Honestly, this dynamic is really only saved by Josh Dallas and Jennifer Goodwin's chemistry as Snow and Charming. Chemistry that was so good that they actually, fell in love in real life.
Like the honorable thing to do.
That's the cutest fucking thing I've seen in my entire life.
Honestly, they're the only things that really save this relationship, because I'm not gonna make it a secret of the fact that I think the Charmings are pretty boring characters. Ultimately, we get a pretty standard double climax to this episode where Mary Margaret eventually finds John Doe passed out by a toll bridge, which is pretty funny because in the B-plot we see them fighting trolls on a troll bridge. It's like poetry sort of, it rhymes. Then back during the B-plot, Snow saves Charming from a bunch of trolls that live on the, troll bridge by using this weird magic powder that she said she was going to use on the evil queen. So they both get a moment to save each other before going their separate ways. Charming gets his ring back and Snow decides to find some other way to take down the evil queen, but not before doing this cheeky little maneuver.
Find out.
That's the cutest fucking thing.
Then John Doe's returned to the hospital, where we learn his name is actually David. We learn this from his wife, Catherine, who we realize was the princess in the flashback that was in the arranged marriage with Charming. She didn't know her husband was in a coma, and then now Regina found her, yada yada yada, more things to get in the way of the Snow and Charming romance. And that's really where the episode ends, but it also begins one of the weirdest arcs of the show. We begin the Snow and Charming infidelity arc, where they're all trying to be together because they're Snow White and Prince Charming and they're meant to be together, but he's clearly married. It's probably the most overtly soap opera thing we're gonna see in this entire show, next to like the insanely huge family tree we'll eventually get. And honestly, I just think it's out of place. I mean, this show is a soap opera, so it makes sense, but the thing that made this show really special, and we'll get to it later, is really the concept of true love not being about romantic love. The motherly love that Regina and Emma feel towards Henry is really what the show's about, and that's such an interesting idea, to make a fairy tale that is about true love, but not about romantic love. Instead, it's about motherly love. All in all, this episode's fine, but I'm beginning to see why I don't like Snow White and Prince Charming all that much. 5 out of 10. Season 1, Episode 4, The Price of Gold. Now this episode begins with a bang. Quite literally. From the beginning, it's clear this episode's going to be about Cinderella, as we see her doing her chores while her stepsisters go to the ball. Then her fairy godmother shows up, and we're getting most of the usual flavors until... That's right, Rumpelstiltskin's there. He kills her fairy godmother and then ends up making a deal with Cinderella to get her to go to the ball. Honestly, this is just a really good idea overall. I mean, this show really works well when it's taking different concepts of fairy tales and kind of mashing them together. You know, making Rumpelstiltskin Cinderella's fairy godmother. That's just an interesting and new idea. Regardless, Cinderella goes to the ball and there's some vague promise that Rumpelstiltskin's going to be back to claim something for their deal. Then we jump back to the A-plot where we get to see Emma and Henry hanging out again before they're interrupted by Jamie Dornan and Regina. Regina does the whole "you suck bitch" thing on Emma, but then Emma's like, "No, you." Then Emma goes into the back laundry room that's connected to the diner that customers can just use. Either way, she meets a heavily pregnant woman there named Ashley, who we quickly realize is the real-life counterpart of Cinderella. Then they actually have a really nice conversation about being a mother. Nobody thinks that Ashley can be a mother by herself, but Emma tries to tell her that she's got to do it. She's got to buckle down and prove all these people wrong. However, Ashley might have gone a little too far, because then we see her breaking into Mr. Gold's shop, knocking him out, and stealing something. Wanting to keep his business out of the eyes of the law, Gold goes to Emma to try to privately get her to find Ashley, since he knows that her and Ashley have some kind of a connection. Emma agrees and Henry tags along, much to her ire. Flashing back to the B-plot, we get to see Cinderella and the prince having their whole wedding and everything after the ball, and guess who's there?
So happy you could come.
Thank you, Father.
Oh, no, I wasn't talking about the Charmings, I was meaning this guy. Rumple says it's time to pay her end of the deal, which doesn't turn out to be gold or jewels, it's actually her firstborn child. And taking your firstborn child is obviously a big facet of the original Rumpelstiltskin fairy tale, and so they were obviously going to do something with that in this show, but I think it's kind of funny because if you look at what Rumple does in the rest of the show, there's like nothing that would lead you to believe he'd ever want another child. Like, I genuinely can't figure out why he wanted her child. Cinderella confesses to the prince about everything that she did with Rumpelstiltskin, and they resolve to try and figure out a way to beat him. Meanwhile, during the A-plot, Emma uses one of Ashley's friends to find her old boyfriend, you know, the real-life version of the prince, who she tries to talk into being there for Ashley and her baby. But his Sigma male dad says all women are thoughts, and he closes the door in her face. After a bit, Emma realizes that Ruby was only stalling for Ashley so that she could try and skip town. Back during the B-plot, Cinderella works together with Snow and Charming to try and find a way to trap Rumple by tricking him into signing a document that'll paralyze him. This is actually a really cool moment of dramatic irony because we as the viewer know that Rumpelstiltskin was captured by them earlier in the show, but we don't exactly know how, so we're kind of wondering if this is how it's done or if he's going to escape and then something else is going to happen. Regardless, the plan goes off without a hitch, he gets paralyzed, and then the prince gets kidnapped. This is a pretty weird way to end the B-plot, mostly because this whole thing's a cliffhanger because we don't know what happened to the prince and why Rumple wants the baby and what Cinderella's gonna do now. But the only problem is this plot never really comes back around. There's gonna be a lot of episodes we're gonna talk about in this first season that don't really lead anywhere because the characters they're about didn't have the star power to stay around. We don't really see Ashley or learn about what happened to Cinderella in the future, and it gets even weirder when we get to the 7th season and they just invent a new person who's Cinderella. And that might not be this episode's fault for, later episodes not playing off it, but it is this episode's fault for ending on a cliffhanger. Either way, we eventually get to the end of the A plot where Emma does end up finding Ashley on the edge of town ready to give birth. And they have an actually really good conversation about what it means to be a mother and how important it is for Ashley to really want to take care of this baby if she does want to keep it. And it's even more empowering because Henry gets to see his mother, who gave him up for adoption, say all of this. Ultimately, the episode ends with Ashley giving birth as the prince comes back and they can be parents together, but there's also another little wrinkle, which is what Mr. Gold wanted. It turns out when Ashley found out she was pregnant, she made a deal with Mr. Gold to sort of give up her baby to him, but now she wants to keep it, so she stole the paperwork that had that on it, and he still wants his baby. See, I don't know if you can pick this up, but it's exactly what was happening in the flashback with Cinderella and Rumpelstiltskin. I know, that's high-level storytelling right there. You should really just take a second and abbreviate on that. Fortunately, Emma's able to get Ashley out of the deal by agreeing to owe Mr. Gold a favor, which is one of the most dangerous things you could do in this town. And then the episode just kind of ends. If it feels like I sped through this one pretty quickly, that's because I did, because this episode isn't really all that interesting. Outside of the deep conversations that Emma and Ashley have, and obviously Robert Carlyle as Mr. Gold and Rumpelstiltskin, there really wasn't much to take away from this episode. It all centers around Ashley, who's a character that doesn't come back, and if I'm being honest, really isn't that interesting. Again, the main central thing that we love about this show is Emma, Regina, and Henry's relationship, and Regina is barely in this episode. I don't know, it gets like a 4. I don't know, I really don't care much about this episode. Season 1, Episode 5. That Still Small Voice. This episode begins in the B plot where we get to see a little boy stealing money from people while they're watching a puppet show, only to reveal that this little boy is related to the 2 adults that are running the show. It's the classic family scamming people together storyline where one of them grows a conscience. The cool part is that we learn that this little boy is actually Jiminy Cricket, and we realize very quickly this is going to be a Jiminy Cricket centric episode. Back in the A plot, Archie and Henry have another therapy session, and again, we get to see some just really good child psychology. I really like Archie through most of this series, and since this episode is pretty centered around him, I think it's better for it. After that, we get to see Emma become a deputy under Jamie Dornan, since she was talking about planting roots in the last episode. Then they get called in when there's some explosion down in an old abandoned mine shaft in town. As the mayor, Regina wants to demolish the whole mine to create some new town fixture, but Henry's suspicious of it because he thinks she's hiding something. Then Regina threatens Archie to try and get this whole curse thing out of Henry's head, which again is another great bit of dramatic irony. We as the audience know that it's because Regina as the evil queen doesn't want the curse to be broken, but it also works well for the characters in the universe because the things that Henry is doing to try and prove the curse is real is dangerous, so it would make sense for his adoptive mother to want that to stop. I'm just gonna try and praise that as like a big thing here because that's something that permeates almost every single episode, but I don't want to single it out in every episode because that would take way too long. Regardless, after Archie is thoroughly rimmed, reamed, and penetrated verbally by Regina, we go back to the B plot. And now grown-up Jiminy woes about how he feels trapped by his parents in this criminal lifestyle, and even connects with this little boy about their shared love of crickets. The cricket analogy throughout this episode is actually really interesting because they use this as an analogy for freedom, since Jiminy in the flashbacks wants to be a cricket so he can be free, which explains why he becomes a cricket later on down the line. And it also explains why there's no crickets in Storybrooke, since they're all trapped by the curse. What is this, subtlety in my fairy tale soap opera? Moving on, we get to see Archie and Henry meet with this other guy, Marco, who he says is Geppetto, and thus rationalizes why Archie and Marco are best friends because, you know, Geppetto and Jiminy Cricket. From there, we go back to the infidelity arc that I absolutely hate. Mary Margaret and David begin to connect as he's going through rehab to try to get his memories back after his whole coma thing. And I'm not gonna deny that these two are cute together, and I do like Snow and Charming together, but it's just such a weird arc to go on of having them both be cheating on this person, and it's even worse because Catherine's an absolute doll. This is one of my least favorite tropes in any romantic comedy or soap opera where you have the two main leads, but one of them is dating somebody who's kind of just boring, and we have to constantly betray this person because they're boring. If Catherine was a really bad character, then I think this arc would feel better, but she's absolutely trying her best to do what she can under these circumstances, and it's clear she does love David. Look, I'm gonna move away from this because there are full episodes dedicated to this whole infidelity arc that we'll get to in a bit. Anyway, because Archie's afraid of the mayor, he absolutely destroys Henry with facts and logic.
Let's say, hypothetically, Luigi grabs you at 0%.
This causes Henry to go on a bit of a whirlwind side adventure to try and prove himself by going into the dangerous mines to find whatever source of the curses down there that Regina's trying to hide. With that, we go back to the B plot where we see Jiminy getting some magic potion from Rumpelstiltskin that'll apparently help him become a free man. I don't know about y'all, but I vastly prefer the A plot to the B plot in this episode. Anyway, back in the A plot, Archie goes in the mines after Henry because he feels like he failed him, which, let's be honest, he kind of did. And the rest of the A plot really kicks into gear. It's Henry going around the mine looking for something to prove that the curse is real, while Archie's just trying to get him out of there as the tunnels collapsed. When they find an elevator out, Archie's able to confide in Henry that he doesn't really think that he's the conscience that Henry thinks he is. There's no reason for him to be Jiminy Cricket because he's just as bad as everybody else. But Henry just has a really good speech about how being a conscience and being Jiminy Cricket isn't just about always being right or doing the right thing. It's about overcoming evil through good. And then we move back to the B plot where we get to see this in action as the family tries to scam these poor villagers to take what is basically snake oil. And when it works, Jiminy feels terrible, so terrible that he uses the Dark One's potion on his parents, only for...
How frail do you think we are, son?
Rainwater won't hurt us.
So it turns out the potion and the fake elf tonic they were selling were swapped, which means when Jiminy goes back into the farmer's house, he sees... I'm telling you, this shit is metal as fuck. It's then revealed that the farmer's had a son who is clearly just Geppetto. I don't know why they're trying to make it a mystery. It's just Geppetto. It's just Geppetto as a kid. Anyway, we wrap up the B plot with seeing how Jiminy became a cricket as the Blue Fairy, who still looks just fucking hilarious.
You are horrifying to look at.
She grants his wish to be free, which to him means turning into a cricket and being immortal, which I don't know if I'd love that trade-off. I get to live forever, but I'm also a cricket. Very strong, would you still love me if I was a platypus things going on here. And this is also the part where we learn that the kid is Geppetto, which we knew the whole time. I don't know, it's not a huge reveal, but it's still weird they'd like try to create it like it was this big plot twist. Anyway, now we have to wrap up the A plot where we see Archie and Henry find this elevator that's going to lead them out of the mines, and they have that aforementioned conversation from earlier about conscience and being good and everything. Emma then uses a wench to come down the elevator shaft to try to pull them out, but then the elevator begins to fall, and it's actually a pretty tense and cool scene as they try and stay alive. Archie then inevitably uses his funny little umbrella to hang on to Emma, which I don't know, it's just a cool little callback to them talking about the umbrella at the beginning of the episode. They're saved, but Henry doesn't find the proof that he needs, and Regina is not too happy about his actions. And then Archie decides to thoroughly destroy Regina with facts and logic.
You're gonna die at some point here. I'm coming for you, you idiot.
Then the episode comes to an end, but not before we see what Regina was actually hiding, which is Snow White's glass coffin under the mines. This is a really weird way to end the episode, especially because this doesn't really come back since Regina just destroys the mines and nobody ever finds the coffin. You know, I should really start making a tally about characters or plot points or reveals that just never come back. Anyway, I actually quite like this episode. I think it's about an 8 out of 10. It's not top tier, but I think Archie's actually a really good character to base things off of. Usually the best episodes are the ones that center around Regina, Henry, and Emma, but some of these side characters can kind of pull their weight. Season 1, Episode 6, The Shepherd. Oh, at least it's nice to finally get a charming episode. This episode begins with David and his newly reunited wife, Catherine, returning to their house to try to have some big celebration party about, you know, him coming out of a coma, which, you know, I imagine that's got to be like top 10 coolest party ideas. Well, you know, not for the guy that was in the coma, but like everybody else. That would just be a cool story to tell. And David does not make it a secret of how little he remembers and also how little he cares about not remembering. And look, I'm gonna get this out of the way right now. David fucking sucks in this season. Every episode that is about him cheating on his wife with Snow White is horrible. Because look, I know that's kind of a spoiler because that's what the episode's gonna be about down the line, but like, I think we can all tell this is where this is going. I don't even know if it was intentional or not intentional to make him such a piece of shit, but he just is a really, really shitty person to everybody around him. And this episode's gonna sort of begin that. Since while his newly reunited wife cries in the kitchen about how distant he's being, he's outside making fuck you eyes at Snow White. And again, I genuinely can't tell if we're supposed to think that this is cute, but it really isn't. Look, moving on, we go back to the fairy tale plotline to the B plot, where we actually see a really cool flashback. Not, you know, visually. I mean, we can all tell that this doesn't look great, but you know, it's the effort that it put in. It's the Power Rangers of it. You know, they had a $20 budget for VFX, but they're just trying their little hearts out. And you know what? That's enough for me. Charming then kills this weird troll guy, and we get introduced to both his father, the king, and this other king who we quickly learn is actually Midas, you know, the guy who could touch things and turn it into gold. They strike an agreement for Charming to kill a dragon that's been terrorizing Midas's land, and Midas will grant gold to all of his kingdom. Seems like your standard fairy tale soap opera thing, but then we get a really cool moment at the end.
Just because I was easily able to kill this brute doesn't mean...
So yeah, Charming's dead, and his dad isn't taking it too well. He then tries to make a deal with Rumpelstiltskin to bring him back to life, but as Rumpel says,
Out of the question, he's dead. Magic can do much, but know that.
They then manage to come to a solution with just the best soap opera writing.
What? His twin brother.
I don't know what it is, but doing this whole twin brother cliche, I just kind of like it. Back in the A plot, Mary Margaret has a conversation with Emma where she talks about how guilty she feels for having feelings for David. Then we go to David talking to his wife and feeling guilty for having feelings for Mary Margaret. Look, we're just going to be going in circles for a while with these two. Then we get to go back to the B plot at least, which is way more interesting in this episode, and we get to see just the perfect haircut on Charming's head. I love imagining them trying to figure out how to make this guy look like a peasant, and they just decide to take a chainsaw to his hair. Charming and his mom talk about how their farm isn't doing too well, and then Rumpelstiltskin shows up with another deal. Basically, Charming, or rather James, is the bastard son of the king, who was also twin brothers to, you know, the other guy that we saw die in the beginning. And Rumpel proposes a very simple deal. Charming will just pretend to be the James that died and came back to life somehow. I don't know how they're trying to spin this on Midas. But either way, he'll do that. The king's men will kill the dragon, and then he'll take the glory for it, and so, the whole gold for dragon deal will still remain. Charming reluctantly agrees, but he also does say a line in this scene that is just gonna be perfect for his character later down the line.
When I marry, I want it to be because I choose to spend the rest of my life with someone I love.
Remember this line, because this is the one thing they use to substitute for the fact that Charming does not have any morals. Back in the A plot, we get a nothing scene where the doctor guy that Mary Margaret went on a date with is a dick, and Regina's a dick to Mary Margaret. And like, why am I talking about this? This is like just the most useless A plot ever. Thankfully, we move back to the B plot pretty quickly, where we see Charming getting ready to go fight the dragon, but he has no idea how to be a knight. Then eventually him and the king's men eventually arrive at the dragon's cave and proceed to get skill diffed.
Kill atrocity. Kilimanjaro.
What ensues is a hilarious yet oddly endearing action scene where Charming fights the dragon. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good, obviously, but again, we're going back to that Power Rangers thing. Like, it doesn't need to look good. They are just trying so hard. So that scene ends quickly, and we move back to the A plot for, like, the rest of the episode. At least something interesting happens when David tells Mary Margaret that he's gonna leave Catherine, and then she has a whole internal panic attack about what that really means, and she clearly wants to be with David, and then she goes to Emma to get advice, who just gives the best advice.
He left her. It's one thing to say that he wants you, but it's another to actually make a choice, and now he has.
This is our hero, ladies and gentlemen. They plan to go meet up at the toll bridge to confess their love, but David gets a little turned around and runs into the best guide imaginable, Regina, who points him in obviously the right direction with no ulterior motives. David arrives at Mr. Gold's shop where he sees this weird pinwheel contraption that proceeds to hypnotize him. They don't really explain what happens here, but basically David gets bunch of his memories back and begins to feel guilty about cheating on his wife for probably the first time in his life. Oh no, not the cheating on his wife part, I meant the feeling guilty part. Either way, David still goes to the toll bridge, but is there to tell Mary Margaret that he's getting his memories back and wants to stay with Catherine, and she just lays into him in the best possible way.
The right thing to do was not to lead me on. So you've made your choice.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I guess it just wasn't meant to be.
Yes, Queen.
Then, as a way to wrap up this A-plot, if you could really even call it that, Emma drives around Storybrooke at night where she sees a strange man climbing out of Regina's house, and obviously as the deputy, she feels the need to do something.
This is volunteering?
Plans changed. Regina needed me to...
Sleep with her?
No.
Yeah, I didn't mention it in the last episode because it's kind of stupid, but I guess Jamie Dornan and Regina kind of have like a friends with benefits thing going on. And Emma acts all jealous, which I'm actually okay with because it's mostly about the fact that they're doing it while Henry's in the house, which is not great parenting. Somehow this one scene was more interesting than anything else that happened to the A-plot, just for the fact that it at least had Henry in proximity to it. Then we get to see Charming deliver the dragon's head in the end of the B-plot, only for Midas to reveal there's a little extra wrinkle to their deal.
I would only give her hand in marriage when I could find a companion worthy of her. And now I have.
Oh no, Charming has to marry somebody he doesn't love. That was the thing he said he would never do at the beginning of the episode. You see what I mean when I say the soap opera melodrama doesn't work for the Charmings when it does for, you know, Henry, Regina, and Emma? These two plot lines just have vastly different energies. Anyway, the episode just kind of wraps up with Charming saying goodbye to his mom and an actual kind of emotional scene. I don't know, I'll take anything after this. This episode wasn't great, but I did like the B-plot a fair bit, so I guess I'll give it like a 5. Season 1, Episode 7. The Heart is a Lonely Hunter. At long last, Jamie Dornan gets an episode. I just hope this one really grows and evolves his character and, you know, gives his character a good sense of longevity in this series.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
This episode continues off the end of the last one where we see Jamie Dornan throwing darts in a bar while drinking. He's clearly drunk by this point, which doesn't make it better when Emma enters and is clearly not happy with what he was doing with Regina. So as a big romantic gesture, he decides to, try to kill her?
What the hell?
Guess he was already method acting for Christian Grey. Either way, Emma and Graham go outside to have a confrontation about this, and Emma tells him in no uncertain terms that she's
not mad. I'm just disappointed.
Then Graham gives a very, very emotional and powerful monologue about how empty he feels inside, this deep-seated nothing that he feels around anyone, and especially around Regina, and how that's what he tries to fill with Regina, but it doesn't work. Emma rightfully asks if this has anything to do with her, to which he responds by, sexually assaulting her. We're really 0 for 2 on the whole, you know, respecting women front in this episode, aren't we? Emma rightfully tells him to go fuck off, and he decides to go fuck off by going to fuck Regina. A natural extension of what he was talking about before. This deep-seated apathy, this nothing that he feels needs to be replaced by something, so he goes to the only person who will let him express some sort of feeling. We go back to the B-plot with this, where we see Regina and Snow mourning the death of her father, the king. A death that Regina obviously had nothing to do with, and oh yeah, she's already plotting, isn't she?
Responsible for his passing? She sought comfort with me. Sickening.
I like being bad. It makes me happy.
Much like in the original fairy tale, the evil queen goes to get a huntsman to kill Snow White, only this time it's not about Snow White being the fairest of them all, but rather some sort of mysterious revenge that Regina wants to get against Snow White. It's clear by this point the backstory of the evil queen and Snow White was very well set in stone. There's a lot of foreshadowing here, but I do think it's kind of funny because if you go back to the pilot, there's one line that Snow says that doesn't seem to make much sense anymore.
She poisoned an apple because she thought I was prettier than her.
This pilot was obviously filmed before this show was even confirmed to be produced going forward, so it's very likely they didn't even have an idea for the conflict between Regina and Snow and then had to come up with it once the show was greenlit. I don't know, that's just kind of interesting because that and other things like how Gold was trying to take Cinderella's baby without having really a reason to do it, as we see later, it heavily implies that there were a lot of things that the writers just kind of didn't think about and had to change going forward. I don't really say this is a bad thing, more so as just sort of an interesting note about how explorative writing can be when you're working on a show like this. It's just kind of nice and humbling to see a big show like this have very obvious plot holes and things that don't make sense, and how we kind of all just shrug our shoulders at it because it really doesn't matter that much. Regina says she's looking for a heartless hunter who can do whatever she wants, kill the fairest of them all, as she says, and that naturally leads us to Jamie Dornan, who's hunting a deer. We get a cool introduction to this wolf that supposedly raised him, that and a bunch of other wolves, since apparently in this version the huntsman that killed Snow White was raised by wolves in the wilderness, which is why he hates people. It's a pretty cliche take on a hunter archetype. I mean, this was probably my first ranger I ever made in D&D too. I don't mind it very much though. Anyway, this wolf ends up being a very important character since he's the one in the future that's leading Graham around the storybook as he's trying to get his memories back. Yeah, you see, Graham's depression is kind of going into overload since when he kissed Emma, he saw a bunch of memory flashbacks from his time in the Enchanted Forest that he doesn't really understand, and this whole episode's really mostly just about him looking for this wolf that's trying to remind him of his past life, and normally this would seem kind of weird since there's no reason for him to get his memories back, but he did kiss Emma, the savior, the person who's gonna break the curse and get everyone's memories back. Again, that's just really subtle writing since it's never really spelled out to us why he's getting his memories back. The writers just kind of trust in the audience to understand the connection between the kiss, Emma, and Graham's memories. I just really like it when writers put a lot of trust in their viewers. Either way, this huntsman ends up getting recruited by Regina, who offers him a seat in her court, but he doesn't want any of that. Instead, all he really wants is for the hunting of wolves to be outlawed, which obviously the Queen has the power to do. Look at our boy sticking up for his fellow mates. You love to see it. They agree, and he's off to go rip out Snow White's heart, like a very weird Kingdom Hearts boss. Back in the A plot, we see Mary Margaret and Emma getting into a confrontation about Mary Margaret going on another date with that doctor guy who's revealed as Dr. Whale, whereas Emma is fighting her obvious feelings for Graham, but more blah-de-blah heterosexual nonsense. Let's get back to the Wolf Boys. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Graham tries to hunt down this mystery wolf and actually runs into Mr. Gold, who gives him this whole spiel about past lives and dreams, further reinforcing the idea that he's actually Rumpelstiltskin, since what he's doing would further move various pieces to, breaking the curse if Graham gets his memories back. Once Graham finds this wolf, he gets another fresh memory flashback of all these images going through his head, but one image sticks out in his mind the most, a memory or a dream of him holding a knife to Mary Margaret. Curious, he goes to see the teacher, and they have a actually really cool conversation. It's nice to get to see these two paired up since, well, I don't think they've really had a conversation by this point. One of the biggest problems long-form stories like this can run into is pigeonholing characters into relationships or storylines. Mary Margaret and David can't do anything that isn't about the infidelity arc. By simply pairing up different characters and forcing them to talk about different things, it gives the show so much more brevity. Their conversation mostly goes the way you'd think. It's just Graham talking about the absurdity of the memories, whereas Mary Margaret is trying to reassure him that everything's fine, he never threatened her with a knife, and all of this kind of sounds like that weird story that Henry's been talking about. Which leads Graham to his next clue.
I'm here to see you, Henry. I was hoping you could help me.
Help you with what?
It's about your book. Am I in it?
However, before we can get back to this conversation, we move to the B-plot where we see a very uncomfortably looking huntsman guiding Snow White through the woods, and it's very clear what's about to happen. You know what they say, dramatic irony is a storytelling technique in which the audience knows something the characters don't. However, Snow White proves she's a little bit smarter than that, since she's easily able to pick up on the fact that the huntsman isn't like the rest of her guards for a lot of reasons. She then makes a run for it once her suspicions are confirmed, but strangely enough, gives up really easily. Snow White knows that the huntsman is obviously a great tracker, so she just kind of gives up since she's not going to be able to run forever, and instead decides to use her head start to write a note to give to the queen once she's dead. The huntsman reluctantly accepts and then reads the note, and we don't actually see what's on the note yet, but it's apparently powerful enough for the huntsman to spare her. She runs off and he eye fucks a deer. It's pretty clear what heart he's going to use for this one. Back in the present, we see Regina threaten Emma for like the 89th time without any actual backing. This time it's about Graham and how weird he's acting, though Emma's smart enough to realize that none of her threats are credible by this point.
For a threat to be credible, you have...
Luckily, we quickly move away from that kind of mediocre scene to an actually really good scene where Graham visits Henry to talk to him about the stories in his book. Again, this moment's great because we're pairing up different characters. I don't think Graham and Henry had even had a conversation before this scene at all. And again, it's entertaining because Henry's put in an interesting position where he's faced with an adult character who actually believes him. This scene, all about Henry telling Graham that he's the huntsman and what his destiny is very entertaining because it's like nothing we've seen so far. We even get some pretty good comedic moments.
You kissed my mom?
What was that face, Jamie Dornan? Can we get another take on that? The scene ends with Henry telling Graham that his heart's been stolen by the evil queen, and thus continues the next part of the episode where now Graham has to go and try and find his heart by meeting up with his old wolf buddy. However, he's stopped by Emma, who tries to dissuade him by trying to convince him that this is all in his head and that his heart is very much real, and we get just kind of a cute scene.
You have a heart. I can prove it.
Look, I know where this is going. I know that every relationship Emma has with a guy is gonna go downhill because every relationship in this show has to be sacrificed onto the pyre that is Captain Swan. But it's moments like these where I really, really wonder what could have happened if Graham had stayed around a little longer. Look, spoilers for later in the episode, he's gonna bite it by the end of this. Jamie Dornan needs to go spank women on camera for like 10 years and ruin his entire career. But I seriously would have loved to have seen him stick around a little longer. But look, I'm getting ahead of myself. The point is, this scene ends with a really tender moment where this whole idea of the evil queen stealing Graham's heart is trying to be used as a metaphor for the fact that Regina has this abusive hold on him where he can't feel like he can love anybody else. This is a really good allegory because both things are true. The evil queen does literally have his heart because, you know, magic fairy tale nonsense, but he's also in an abusive relationship with Regina. So this whole episode is just charged with a very interesting energy since both the fairy tale and the real world plot lines are intersecting in thematic ways that I really haven't seen before. However, before the conversation between these two can really get off the rails, Emma gets distracted since she notices the wolf that's been stalking Graham this whole time, and they go run off to chase him into the cemetery. There they find a mausoleum that Graham thinks has his heart inside of it, and then they go explore it, but obviously find nothing. Regina shows up since this mausoleum houses her dead father, you know, the guy that she kinda KO'd in episode 2. A fight then breaks out between all three of them, and Graham gives a very emotional monologue to Regina.
She's right. It's between us, and things have to change.
And I wonder why that is all of a sudden.
It has nothing to do with her. You know, I've realized that I don't feel anything, Regina. And I know now it's not me. It's you.
So you're leaving me for her?
I'm leaving you for me.
Fucking props to this show for writing an incredibly emotional and satisfying story about a male getting abused in an abusive relationship all the way back in 2011. Regina never lays a hand on Graham, but it's clear she's been emotionally manipulating him for years, and it is so satisfying to get to see him stand up for himself, and not because of some sappy soap opera romantic bullshit where he's running to Emma to love him now and then he's gonna get some kind of strange revolving door of exes. No, he stands on principle and says,
I'd rather have nothing than settle for less. Nothing is better than what we have. I need to feel something, Regina, and the only way to do that is to give myself a chance.
Regina tries to derail this by making it about Emma coming into their lives, but no, he remains firm. Everything in this scene is perfectly executed, from the amazing performances, the writing, even just the set background, and this brief little catfight that Emma and Regina have. I cannot think of a single thing I did not like about this moment. After that, we move back into the end of the B plot, where we see the huntsman trying to deliver Snow White's heart to the evil queen. The huntsman then reads off the note that Snow made for the queen, which fills in a lot of the gaps in the story, but in a really peculiar way. The way Snow talks about the evil queen, it's not like she's talking to some enemy, but like an old lost friend that she feels pity for, and it really makes the story much more intriguing since, again, by this point, we don't really know why they're enemies. This episode does give us a pretty ominous and foreboding line about how Snow apparently couldn't keep a secret, and that's why Regina hates her. Foreshadowing is a literary device used to hint at future plot points. Regardless, from here we move into an actually pretty well edited scene where we quickly flash back and forth between the A and B plots as both of them are wrapped up simultaneously. In the B plot, the evil queen is able to figure out that the heart doesn't belong to Snow and instead decides to take the huntsman's heart, as she swears that he'll always be by her side and he'll always be on a leash, and if he should ever try and break free of it, this is mirrored in the A plot as Graham and Emma go back to the station and obviously have their little kiss. Graham's memories then come flooding back to him incredibly fast as we realize that this moment is important since it's technically True Love's kiss. Okay, look, I'm about to give the writers a Mount Everest-sized amount of credit for something they probably weren't doing. One of the magical rules they set up in this universe is the concept that True Love's kiss can break any curse. Snow White was put under a sleeping curse in the first episode, and the reason why she was able to wake up is because she was kissed by Prince Charming, her one true love. Basically, think about love in this universe kind of like those weird movies about soulmates who are constantly bonded together and will always be together, you know, kind of like an actually good version of Imprinting from Twilight. This moment's important because in this moment, Emma and Graham are the one true loves of each other's lives, and so when they kiss, all curses are broken, which includes the dark curse, the curse that sent all the fairy tale characters here, and the curse that is suppressing their memories. And I really think this is incredible because it not only shows that Graham could have had a lot more longevity in this series as Emma's one true love, but also because this whole aspect of one true loves and true love's kiss and breaking curses and all that hasn't really been spelled out to the viewer yet. Rather, we must connect the dots between love, curses, and true love's kiss. And that's what I just love about this scene. Wow, I said love like 50 times. Anyway, this moment doesn't last long because obviously you can't have the fairy tale characters getting their memories back this early in the season. So Regina goes to her little Dexter's laboratory under her father's grave and crushes Graham's heart. He dies in the station in Emma's arms, and the episode ends on a somber note. What a fucking amazing episode of television. When I went into this series, I had my expectations muted. I knew what I was watching, and I really thought no episode was really gonna blow me away. You know, I knew what I was gonna get. The only episodes that were gonna work were the episodes that really leaned into the campy nature and didn't take themselves that seriously. But no, Season 1, Episode 7 of Once Upon a Time, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter is just a fucking amazing episode of television. I would put it on the same level as episodes such as Face Off, Images, Remember It, and Plan and Execution. Graham is an amazing character to center an episode around because one of the things I would like to heavily reinforce going forward is that this show works when it is not doing standard fairy tale thing. Making a storyline about the evil queen learning to find true love through motherhood is something different, and that's why it works. Making a storyline around the huntsman from Snow White learning to love again and learning why he even spared Snow White to begin with is another amazing thing to write a story around, because we have never really seen that in a good way. And then further using that as an allegory to explore the idea of depression, grief, and abusive relationships on the male side of a relationship, you have just created one of the most original ideas for an episode of television I have ever seen. All you need to do is hire amazing actors like Jennifer Morrison, Lana Parrilla, and Jamie Dornan to bring this idea to life. And yes, they are all amazing actors, including Jamie Dornan. If all you know him from is The Spanking Simulator, go watch Belfast and go watch A Haunting in Venice. This man deserves so much more than being remembered for these stupid movies. And I'll just say it right now, he should have been Doctor Doom. 10 out of 10. The best episode of the series. Nothing is ever going to challenge this. Season 1, Episode 8. Desperate Souls. This episode picks up in a flashback in the B-plot where we get to see a non-magical and much more sane-looking Rumpelstiltskin. He's just a humble villager working with his son when some soldiers come by to pick up this weird girl to enlist her in the army. They do real quick lightning round exposition about some strange ogre war and how there's this weird guy called the Dark One that apparently works with the soldiers and they're kidnapping villagers to fight in the war, and we're just getting all of this out very fast. The important thing about this episode is that we get to see Rumpelstiltskin before he went insane as the Dark One. He's just a cowardly old man who walks with a limp and has a son. He looks very pathetic throughout this entire episode, which makes it satisfying when he eventually does get his powers later. That's basically the gist of the scene. It's just setting up this idea of Rumpelstiltskin before he went evil. Naturally, when we move into the A-plot in the present, we get to see Mr. Gold, since this is obviously going to be about him in the present. He's in his shop painting something when Emma comes in and they have a whole conversation about Graham's passing and what it means for the town, and Mr. Gold even generously gives these 2 walkie-talkies to Emma so that she can talk to Henry discreetly without Regina knowing. Emma and Henry then meet at this little fortress playground thing that was in the first episode, which is kind of their little hideout spot where they talk about their plan to try to break the curse. Emma consoles Henry since he's feeling really sad about what happened to Graham, and he even gets a really cool and cute line here.
She killed Graham because he was good, and you're good.
Henry.
Good loses, good always loses, because good has to play fair. Evil doesn't.
Okay, maybe cute's the wrong word. I don't know. I think that line's kind of interesting. Emma gives him the walkie-talkies, but Henry seems kind of dejected as he wants to put a stop to the whole curse planning thing because of what happened to Graham. Emma reluctantly obliges, then goes down to the station to presumably take up the new role of sheriff since Graham's, not coming back. But guess who's there to ruin all the fun?
That's not for you.
Why are you the way that you are?
Regina shows up and verbally states what the A-plot's gonna be about, the fact that she apparently gets to elect sheriff and that she's not choosing Emma because she fucking hates Emma. Emma and Mary Margaret have a whole conversation about this where Emma's naturally pretty pissy since, the guy that she liked kinda died in her arms. They are interrupted by Mr. Gold, who stops by to inform Emma that Regina can't just pick somebody to be sheriff. There has to be an official election, which Emma decides to run for against Gustavo Fring over here, who was basically just going to be a puppet for Regina to do whatever she wants, kind of like what Graham was before he had his whole awakening. With that, we move back to the B-plot, where we get to see Rumple and his son trying to escape the soldiers by leaving at night. This is because Rumple's son is about to come of age where the soldiers are going to draft him into the war, and naturally his dad doesn't want him to go to a war to fight giant monsters that are for sure going to kill him. Balefire does seem a bit reluctant to leave, but decides to go anyway. They stop by to help this old man by the side of the road, and are subsequently caught by the soldiers, who just proceed to tear into Rumple. I mean, I'm talking real cyber bully online COD lobby shit over here.
Spindleshanks. Threadwhistle. Hobblefoot.
His name's Rumpelstiltskin.
Hush, boy. Rumple. The man who ran.
The lead soldier makes Rumple kiss his foot, which is gonna have some nice poetic justice later down the line. Rumple and Balefire go home, but they're also helped by the old man from the road, who spins this whole tale to Rumple about the weird mage guy they saw working with the soldiers earlier. He explains that this guy is called the Dark One, and he's apparently the most powerful mage in the world, and that the only reason he works for the soldiers is because their king has this magical dagger that supposedly controls him. If you control the dagger, you control the Dark One. But there's also a nifty little added bonus. You see, if you kill the Dark One with the dagger, then you become the Dark One. So naturally, Rumple starts plotting a way to get this dagger to protect his son. After that, we go back to the A plot, where Regina and Gold have another little face-off test of wits as Regina tries to interrogate him on why he's helping Emma. And I'm telling you, when these two are on screen together, it's a better show.
We are, after all, both invested in the common good. We're just picking different sides.
Well, I think you picked a really slow horse this time. It's not like you to back a loser.
She hasn't lost yet.
She will.
Never underestimate someone who's acting for their child.
He's not her child. Not legally.
Know who's trifling with technicalities.
Next episode shows Emma and Henry meeting at Granny's Diner, where Henry shows Emma this paper that Sidney, Gustavo Fring is making about how Emma used to be an ex-felon, trying to discredit her. And while Emma dissuades his concerns, Henry actually has a really good argument about why it matters.
This is what I've been trying to tell you. Good can't be evil, because good doesn't do this kind of thing. My mom plays dirty. That's why you can't beat her.
This is going to be a theme we continuously come back to throughout this episode, the idea of good versus evil and how there are certain things good can't do because it's against their morality, but evil can play dirty, so they have a better chance of winning, yada yada yada. We'll get back to this later. The point is, after this scene ends, Emma goes to confront Regina about the paper, and they have another standard conversation, which basically just boils down to Emma asking why Regina hates her, and Regina constantly saying that she's not Henry's mother, as if that has any bearing on this argument. Luckily, this scene ends with a bang. Regina's trapped, but Emma's free, and then they try to make us think that Emma's just gonna leave Regina to burn to death in the fire.
You're gonna leave me, aren't you?
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
And it's important to note, this isn't like an instant fake out. Right after Emma leaves and we are left to assume that she is going to leave Regina to die, we go back to the B plot for like 2 scenes. They genuinely use this cliffhanger to try and build suspense about us wondering if Emma, our hero, was going to let Henry's mother die or not. I cannot tell if that is genius or insanity. So you tell me. In the B plot, Balefire and Rumple have a whole conversation about the plan where they're basically gonna burn down the castle to try to get the Dark One dagger, and Balefire talks about how he's not really afraid to fight in the war, but Rumple tried to dissuade him by talking about his own story of being drafted into the Ogre War and how he barely survived, which brings the conversation back around to something that the soldiers said about how Rumple was apparently a coward who fled from the war, which is why Balefire's mother left them. It's basically just verbal backstory to give Rumple more character, but all of these events will be important for later. Then we go back to the A plot where we see Emma is surprisingly enough saving Regina. Oh my god, I was really shivering in my chair there, worried that Emma was just gonna leave her to die there. Emma pulls her out of the burning building as the firemen arrive, and Regina acts uncharacteristically pissy. Like, I know that she's the bad guy, but again, we're going back to this whole thing about Regina just being way too antagonistic.
Gently. Seriously, you're complaining about how I saved your life? The firemen are here.
You know what, Emma? Maybe you should have left her to die in there. Emma is showered with praise as soon as she gets out, which almost guarantees she'll win the election, and Henry is so excited for her for doing such a brave and righteous action and, not doing the very obvious thing that everybody else would have done in her position. Leave his adopted mother to burn to death. That's what anybody else would have done. Emma's happy for this little event, but does get concerned when she notices a material strategically placed around the burning building. A material that smells just like that weird thing that Gold was painting in his shop. Emma puts 2 and 2 together and goes to confront Mr. Gold in his shop, who completely denies any affiliation he might have had with this mysterious fire. Though he does mention that if anybody would have been involved in creating this fire, they would totally be a super cool Giga Chad with a monster cock. Back in the B-plot, we get more CGI establishing shots. I haven't singled these out yet because we haven't gotten that many, but yeah, get used to these CGI establishing shots. There's going to be a lot of them. Bale and Rumple start the fire outside the castle. The whole thing begins to burn down, and Rumple kind of just wanders through the castle until he finds a painting that has the Dark One dagger behind it. Really, this is like the key to protecting your entire kingdom, and you just have it stored up here. I mean, did you see the shit that Mr. Krabs did to hide the Krabby Patty secret formula? You could at least take a page out of his book. Everything should be fine in the A-plot now as we begin to move to the first debate that will really decide the election. Mary Margaret hangs pictures showing Emma saving Regina to really drum up more attention, and then we oh my god, I'm sorry, I get so scared by Beta Men. Mary Margaret and David have a nothing conversation that boils down to both of them wanting to fuck each other, but they can't fuck each other because the writers won't let them fuck each other yet because they think this conflict is interesting. Thankfully, we move back to Emma, who's mulling over what to do about the Mr. Gold situation. On one hand, if she admits to what Mr. Gold did, then all of the positive attention would vanish and she would potentially implicate herself in arson. But if she doesn't say anything, she would basically be using the dirty tactics that Henry was talking about evil employing. You know, making her evil, meaning that good isn't beating evil in this case, which is really what she wants to do here. She wants to be a good upstanding citizen to show Henry that good can beat evil. The debate then begins as Archie gives some really riveting commentary.
Sidney Glass and Emma Swan. Glass Swan. Sounds like something that a decorator would make you buy. Wow, crickets.
Most of the straight jokes that this show tries to do just don't work, but I don't know, I kind of liked that one.
Put on a smile.
Sidney gives a prepared and incredibly fake speech about all the things he's going to do as sheriff, and I like the little detail that you can see Regina mouthing along to all of the things that he's saying. It's good visual storytelling for the whole Sidney is Regina's puppet part of the story. Emma takes the stand and gives a very powerful speech where she fully confesses to what Mr. Gold did, but admits that she didn't know what Mr. Gold was doing and had no affiliation with it. She accepts the consequences of her actions and leaves the stage with grace, which Regina is incredibly happy about. In the B-plot, we see Rumpelstiltskin use the dagger to summon the Dark One to him, and Dark One then taunts Rumpelstiltskin about the power he now holds and what he can do with the dagger, and Rumple takes this opportunity to up his KD.
Die. Kill-tacular.
The Dark One's hood comes off where it's revealed that he's actually the old man from the road, and this whole thing was a scheme so that he could finally die, since to him, the Dark One's power is just a curse. And once he dies, Rumple's name is etched onto the dagger and his skin begins to change into the sickly monster color we remember from the previous episode. To wrap up the A-plot, we see Emma drinking her sorrows away at Granny's when Henry comes in to say how proud of her he is. It's good to see good stand up to evil in this way, even if they eventually do lose the election, which when Regina comes in, it turns out she actually didn't lose the election, since the people of Storybook are very happy to see somebody stand up to Mr. Gold, since he's kind of the town bully and owns everything. Taking down the town poo-poo head just gives you points, I guess. I'll have to mark that down in my notebook for future plans. The way a bunch of people come flooding into Granny's as they all begin to celebrate Emma becoming the official town sheriff. After that, we wrap up the B-plot where we see Rumple return to his home as the soldiers are getting ready to take his son away for the war, only this time, he's got his dragon install equipped and is wielding his Pack-a-Punch dagger. It maxes out his strength and gives him a plus 12 bonus to AC and movement speed. Rumple then makes the head soldier kiss his foot, only to give him the Makarov treatment. Rumple then ups his KD even more as he goes on a killing spree.
Overkill.
Got that AC 130 inbound. Fortunately, his son isn't too happy to see his pro gamer moves, and Rumple says a very ominous line to end the B-plot on.
I protected what belongs to me. And I'm not scared of anything.
With that, we then move back to the end of the A plot where we see Gold and Emma meet as he congratulates her for becoming sheriff, but also reveals a cute little wrinkle to his plan.
They had to see you defy me. And they did.
No way. There's no way you play.
Now, I personally like to think that this is bullshit, but it is a cool plot point to have Emma get elected, not for standing up to Regina, but standing up to the far worse evil that is Mr. Gold / Rumpelstiltskin. And then the episode just kind of ends. This episode was definitely pretty solid. The only problem with it is that it's coming off of the heels of one of the best episodes of television and easily the best episode of the entire series. I'm gonna give it a 6, but this is a real strong 6. This is a hefty 6. This is a Giga Chad 6, alright? Nothing to be ashamed of here. Season 1, Episode 9. True North. This episode begins with Henry in a store picking out his Marvel Rivals team. He meets a school gamer girl and her brother who seem to be friendly but actually have ulterior motives. When they try to leave the store clerk, who's very obviously sneezy, accuses them of shoplifting, and Henry accidentally finds some stuff in his bag he was stealing. The two kids, Ava and Nicholas, were trying to use Henry to shoplift, and we later find out this is because they're orphans who need to survive. Regina comes down to the store and demands that Emma arrest the kids while taking Henry away. Emma decides to cut the kids some slack since she was an orphan just like them and had to do all kinds of things to survive when she was a kid. However, when Emma takes the kids home, she's able to pick up on the fact that they're lying about their parents and then catches them. She takes them back to Mary Margaret's place where they try and figure out what to do with them, since if she turns them over to Child Protective Services, that might mean they're split up, which the kids very clearly don't want to happen. Emma decides to kick the A plot into gear by trying to find these kids' dads, since they say their mom passed away and they don't have anybody to take care of them. Regina, as always, is the antagonist of this plot. She demands that the kids be split up and make cringe TikToks and drink nothing but lean. You know, truly a fate worse than death. With this all set up, we move into the B plot where we get to see these two kids are actually Hansel and Gretel. They're traveling with their father through the woods when he gives them this compass and says that in order to find him, all they have to do is look for true north on the compass.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
The kids do end up eventually getting lost, and even though they do try and find true north, they just end up on the road and almost get run over by...
What are you doing in my forest?
Evil Queen is of course a massive bitch, and they try and run away but are stopped by bad VFX.
You guys need to smoke that.
The kids beg for their lives while saying that they were only trying to find their dad, and Regina cuts them a deal. They go into this witch's house and retrieve something for her, and she'll help them find their dad. The B plot set up, we move back to the A plot, where Henry urges Emma not to go through with sending the kids away. This conversation does take an interesting turn when Henry asks about his own dad and what's the story behind him. Emma then tells Henry a full story about the time she met a firefighter while she was working as a waitress and how she got pregnant but he passed away before Henry was born, saving a family from a burning building. On rewatch, it's very clear Emma's lying to Henry about this in order to protect him from the truth. However, on your first watch through, you might be forgiven for believing Emma here. Normally, when a character in a movie or a show has to tell a fake story or a lie, there's always a hint at the audience that they're lying so that, you know, the audience is in the loop. But Emma remains firm here and tells a very well-prepared story, and it makes sense since the moment Henry entered her life, she probably would have been thinking of some sort of story to tell him about this, since she doesn't want to tell the truth. This story does give Emma an idea when she goes and shows the kids this old baby blankie that she was found in when she was abandoned as a child, and asks the kids if they have anything they remember from when they were a child so that she can try and track down their dad. Ava then gives Emma this compass that's said to belong to their mom, who said it came from her dad, so Emma goes to Mr. Gold, who very obviously would sell something like this, and Mr. Gold does pass along some information, but under a condition.
Forgiveness.
How about tolerance?
Well, that's a start.
In me power.
Emma goes off to find the dad after getting his name, but then there's a really weird reveal where it turns out the paper that Gold was reading off was completely blank, and I really don't know what this reveal is supposed to mean. My best guess is that it's supposed to show that Gold is using magic to remember this guy's name further sowing doubt into the idea that he doesn't remember that he's Rumpelstiltskin and, you know, keeping that little mystery box moving. After that, we go back to the B plot where we see the kids infiltrating this gingerbread house, you know, living up to the classic tale of Hansel and Gretel, going into the candy house and running into the blind witch. They're said to steal some sort of satchel for the evil queen, but they're not allowed to eat anything. You know, that's the one rule. Bad things will happen, and it should be pretty easy to do that. All they have to do is... Yeah, so the blind witch wakes up and says she's gonna eat the kids, and then we see a pile of kid bones. What the hell? This is metal as fuck. What the hell, Disney? Where was this in Wish? Going back to the A plot, Emma meets with Ava and Nicholas's dad, who's this mechanic guy who seems to want nothing to do with him since he didn't even know about their existence. Emma tries to convince him using the compass, but he's such a Giga Chad Sigma male, he's got no time for kids. He's on that grind set, you know? Next, we get a pretty funny scene where Mary Margaret bakes cookies with the kids and decorates them, you know, to mirror the whole fact that the kids in the fairy tale timeline are dying because of the cookies they were trying to eat. Emma's out of options and tries to come up with some other plan that she can use to keep the kids together. Mary Margaret implores her to just tell them the truth and get it over with. After all, Henry was so happy with finding out the truth about his dad. This is where Emma fully confirms that she was lying when she told the story to Henry, and that his dad is actually some deadbeat who's better off outside of his life. Regina then shows up to be a bitch again and ask where the kids are, and this is where Emma has to fully give up and just take the kids away since she is out of options. Hansel and Gretel aren't doing much better in the B plot as they're locked in a candy cage and about to get fried alive. They are able to one-up the witch by tricking her into taking Gretel instead of Hansel and throwing her into the oven, where the evil queen adds a little bit of tender flames and burns her alive. Metal as fuck. Hansel and Gretel then return to the evil queen with the satchel, where they find out inside of it is the apple that's no doubt gonna be force-fed to Snow White in a couple episodes. You think Snow White would ever do an apple mukbang? The kids then ask to be sent to their dad, but Regina has another proposition.
I've decided to invite the two of you to live with me. Here.
They turn down this offer, and Regina's not too pleased, and so she just kind of teleports them into the middle of nowhere where they just begin wandering, trying to find their dad, who was actually captured by Regina. Turns out this whole thing was a test a la the Joker to try to prove that everyone's just like her. They'll always take power over love and family, but kids didn't take her offer, and now they're punished to just kind of look around for their dad forever as he's imprisoned by the evil queen. It's kind of a really messed up way to end the B plot. I mean, I like it because it's not just happily ever after, but like, damn, that's harsh. Then we wrap up the A plot as Emma has to take the kids out of Storybrooke and into Boston. Henry begs her not to go since, according to him, the curse won't allow any of the fairy tale characters to leave the town, but Emma just dissuades him and is defeated. They leave, but suspiciously, the cop car breaks down halfway out of town. She has to call a mechanic to jumpstart it, and guess who that is? After finally meeting them, Nicholas and Ava's dad decides to finally take them in. Well, at least the A plot gets a bit of a happy ending, and I do like the little touch that the dad wasn't able to fully accept his children without actually meeting them. You know, before actually meeting them, they were just names on a piece of paper. But seeing them in real life and getting to look them in the eyes rapidly changes his mind. That's how it is for a lot of things that we don't think are personal. You know, it's the difference between pulling a lever that will flip a train to run over a guy or actively pushing a guy in front of a train. Those are two very different things, even though they have the same result. And with the kids taken in, the episode kind of just wraps up with a final conversation between Emma and Mary Margaret. They talk about Emma's parents and how Henry thinks that Mary Margaret is Emma's mom, and there's even a cute little scene where Mary Margaret picks up the baby blankie that Emma was found in and seems to have a little moment of recollection as some of Snow White's memories come back, but she quickly shakes it off. Our final scene sees Emma and Henry outside at night talking about what happened to the kids, and Henry even throws in a little thank you for bringing up his dad, even though it was a touchy subject, and Emma once again lies as she reinforces the story. They are interrupted though by a strange man coming into town on a motorcycle. He says he comes from out of town, and Henry seems incredibly shocked since, as he said before, nobody comes in and nobody leaves the town. Whatever, I'm sure it doesn't matter, just like how that paper that Emma was reading right before this moment about a kid being found on the side of the road the same time she was abandoned. Doesn't matter, you know, no, neither of those things matter and they're not connected in any way. True North was a surprisingly decent episode. I actually really liked the child performances from both of the two leads. And the stuff with Emma and Henry was really good. Again, surprise, surprise, putting Emma and Henry in the center of the conflict makes for a better episode. 7 out of 10, a very solid and strong episode. Just makes me sad that these kids are never going to come back in any meaningful way. Season 1, Episode 10, 7:15 a.m. Ugh, another Snow and Charming episode. It's kind of amazing how quickly I flipped on Charming and Snow. You know, when I watched the 4th episode, I was really excited to have an episode focusing on them, and now I can't stand these two. I'm not even gonna pretend like I like this episode. This is a 1 out of 10. This is my least favorite episode of the entire series, but let's just get this over with, alright? This episode picks up where the last one left off with this mysterious biker guy meeting with Henry. Henry asks him a bunch of questions, and he remains very aloof and uninterested as he fixes his bike and then drives off from in front of the mayor's house, and Regina does not seem too happy to see this stranger talking to her 10-year-old son. Can't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm actually on Regina's side in this episode. Going back to the person this episode's actually about, we get to see Mary Margaret getting ready very fast in the morning as she's ready to leave for school, but as Emma says, classes don't start for like an hour. Mary Margaret makes up some bullshit about some science fair, but actually she's just going to Granny's Diner to read a book because she knows that David will always come by at 7:15 a.m.
Hey, that's the name of the show.
To pick up coffee for him and his wife because she's such an insane fucking stalker. She'll take any whiff of attention she can get from him.
Bitch, you gotta get like a Nintendo Switch or something.
You know what? I've changed my mind, okay? Look, this isn't all on David. He's not the problem. They're both just fucking crazy. Emma's able to pick up on the lies since she's the sheriff and is really good at deducing things, so she confronts Mary Margaret, and they have a very healthy conversation about the boundaries that Mary Margaret needs to put up. You think she's actually gonna listen to this good advice?
It's false. No way. Not this time. No.
After that, we move into the B plot where we see Snow in hiding, confronted by Little Red Riding Hood. Who? What the hell? We haven't even had a scene with you yet, and they're just dumping you on us? I mean, I recognize you from the future, but like, we didn't even know who you were, that you existed, or that you were friends with Snow White. Why are they just dumping you on us like we're supposed to recognize you? This is where you, like, explain things. Red informs Snow about James's approaching wedding, and acts all sad and whiny, and it's around this point where you should realize what's wrong with this episode, since the B plot is all about the fact that Snow and James can't be together, when they've only had one episode in the flashbacks to show them warming up to each other. This relationship should be a slow burn from enemies to friends to comrades to lovers.
That's disgusting. Where did he post them? Which one? Okay, Which one did he post it on?
We went from enemies to comrades to lovers incredibly quickly, and it all happened off screen. I mean, hell, the whole point of the B plot is that Snow White is so sad about the fact that she can't be with Charming that she goes to Rumpelstiltskin to get some gamer girl bathwater so that she can literally forget about him. This scene's all right because Robert Carlyle is a fucking gem.
What do you need of my hair?
What do you need of it now? It's been plucked from your head.
I'm very uncomfortable with the energy that we've created in the studio today.
Seriously, we are moving way too fast for this plotline. There's only been one episode chronologically that shows these two meeting and then eventually becoming begrudging allies. We cannot jump to lovers from this. After this, we move back to the A plot where we get more soap opera bullshit where, guess what? Mary Margaret runs into Catherine at the store and she's buying a pregnancy test. Uh-oh. Just a reminder, this is the show that gave us one of the single greatest representations of a male being abused in an abusive relationship. And now this is what we're at. Let's just keep this moving. Charming's in his tower being all sad because he has to marry the hot girl, and then his dad shows up and is all like, son, stop being gay, nobody marries for love. Charming takes that advice and throws it out the window along with a note to Snow attached to a bird, basically asking for them to run away together. Yeah, I guess Charming completely forgot about the thing where the king will kill his mom and his entire kingdom will be in ruin if Midas and his deal doesn't go through. None of that's important to our noble hero. No, what really matters is that he gets to be with the girl that he likes. From there, we move back to to the A plot where we see what this plotline is really gonna be about when Mary Margaret finds an injured bird on the side of the road, and then she takes it to the animal shelter where it turns out David works, and then she finds out that this bird was separated from its flock, and that if this bird isn't reunited with his flock, he'll maybe be alone forever. Because apparently this specific species of bird can't hang out with other birds. Okay, look, this is the only thing about this episode that actually makes sense, so just stick with me. That's right, our A plot is all about Mary Margaret taking this one random bird to reunite it with its flock. That's the whole episode. Our past few episodes have been Jamie Dornan struggling with an abusive relationship and the grief of trying to get all of his memories back. Mr. Gold and Emma plotting a fraud electoral campaign to get her elected as sheriff. And 2 orphan kids getting reunited with their dad who abandoned them rather than getting separated in child protective services. And this episode is about Mary Margaret taking a bird into the woods and letting it go. Can I just stop watching this episode? The next part of the episode really kicks into gear when Regina goes to Emma and asks her to investigate the strange man that came into town and was talking to Henry. Just 5 minutes with Emma and Regina. That's all I want. Something to take me away from these two. Snow finds Charming's note in the flashback, and look, can I just be real honest about something? Snow's bandit drip goes hard. That is a great costume. Snow then sneaks into the castle by pretending to be a flower bearer, and right before she meets Charming, she gets caught. She gets thrown into a jail cell and is told to wait for the king, where she finds her cellmate is actually Grumpy. And I do think it is funny because one thing I haven't mentioned is that all of the dwarves throughout the show are just kind of like normal guys who aren't 6 feet tall. They're all kind of just like around 5 feet tall, and I guess that makes them short, but look, I'm just happy they're not doing some crazy visual effects to make them look like dwarves. Okay, look, and I'll be honest, this is a pretty good scene, but it really does infuriate me a lot. Snow and Grumpy have a whole conversation about love and how far they're willing to go, since that's what got Snow White in here, and it turns out that's what got Grumpy in here too. He tried to get a diamond for a girl that he liked, but it turned out the diamond that he bought was actually stolen, so he took the fall for it, and then now he's all angry about it. The scene is pretty okay on the surface, but there's one big thing you could change about it that I think would make it a very, very good scene. I'm talking one of the best scenes in the entire show, but I'll have to get to the end to explain why, so look, just follow me as we go through the rest of the episode. Grumpy and Snow are broken out by Stealthy.
Who?
You know, Stealthy. The 8th dwarf. Meanwhile, in the A plot, Mary Margaret's going around the woods trying to find the right place to drop off this bird, but then she ends up on a cliff dangling for her life, but luckily some hero's there to save her. Ah! No, Mary Margaret, I think you're better hanging there. I think that guy's stalking you. Mary Margaret doesn't have time to deal with David, though, as she's got to get this bird back to her flock, and then we move to the B plot again, where we see Stealthy and Grumpy caught in an ambush out in the courtyard, and then, oh no, Stealthy is dead.
He knew a good bar!
Snow does a really cool maneuver where she bluffs burning down the entire castle to get the dwarves to go free, which, I'll be honest, I think that's just kind of badass. Fortunately, Snow isn't part of the arrangement, so she gets captured by the king yet again. In the A plot, we see the storm that's around Storybrooke has just hit, and now David and Mary Margaret have to go seek shelter inside this cabin that seems abandoned. Uh-oh, they're all wet and cold, so they gotta start a fire and take off these wet clothes, and could you be more transparent around what's going on down here? I swear, this is something Dennis Reynolds would do. They have a whole deep conversation about wanting to be together, but they can't because of their responsibilities and blah, 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 blah. Move this relationship in a direction. I don't even care if they fuck at this point. Just please, do something with these two. After that whole boring scene, the rain stops, Mary Margaret walks outside, lets the bird go, and she rejoins her flock, as apparently the flock was waiting for her. Through the storm. I don't think birds can do that, and yet somehow this bird is still the best character in this entire episode. We get one real quick scene where we see Emma confront August about what he's doing in town and tries to suss out exactly who he is, and it's not great, but it's certainly better than the stuff going on with Mary Margaret and David. This stranger is just very weird because he gives off a lot of Cole Sprouse and Riverdale vibes, you know what I mean, right?
Hauling it to strange and mysterious places. Your imagination will inflame, but so will your frustration, never knowing, only guessing what could possibly be inside that box.
To think this guy is replacing Graham for Emma's love interest. Fucking downgrade, I'll say that much. At least we get a cool reveal where the box that he's carrying, it turns out actually has a typewriter inside it, and he's actually a writer, and that he's coming to this town to find isolation to write in peace. We also get the reveal that his name is actually August, and that they plan to share a drink sometime. Again, more boring heterosexual romantic soap opera bullshit. Can we move back to other interesting stuff now? I get all my boring heterosexual romantic soap opera bullshit from Snow and Charming over here. And thankfully, it's about time to wrap that up as we move back to the B-plot where the king confronts Snow and actually has a really cool plan. He says that Snow needs to go tell Charming that she's here to tell him that she doesn't love him. She'll break his heart so that he can focus on the wedding and doing all of his princely responsibilities. And it's actually really smart since he says that he won't kill Snow if she doesn't, because that would only make Charming love her more. No, he'll kill Charming, because that way he can spin a tale about Charming getting killed by an assassin's blade, because that way Midas would still go through with the peace treaty. And it would break Snow to such a degree that she would never be a problem for him again. Left with no options, Snow confronts Charming and says that she doesn't love him. And look, I'll be honest, I've been ragging this episode, but this is actually a really good scene. For as much as I hate the infidelity plotline, these two do have real good chemistry and they are good actors. The B-plot ends with Snow just kind of walking away. What, did the king just let her go? Why wouldn't she, like, kill her or lock her up or just, you know, remove her from the equation? Now she's out in the world and she can plot against you. The dwarves come back to console her, and there's that cheesy line about how now there's only 7 of us, which, look, it's stupid, but it's like entertainingly stupid, okay? Snow considers taking the potion that Rumple gave her to forget about Charming, but Grumpy says that remembering is very powerful because that pain that we feel makes us who we are, and that now all of them feel it too because much like with Snow, they have all lost somebody that they care about. And now I'm gonna go all the way back to the prison scene to explain how you could have made it much better. Rather than having Grumpy be in there because of some strange off-screen thing about him having a crush on some girl, make it about his connection to his brotherly dwarves. Have him be in there for standing up for one of his dwarves or stealing for them or something, I don't know. That way they have the connection of love, but it's still a little different. And it makes it much more powerful when Stealthy dies, because that way both of them lose something that is directly connected to their pursuit of love. Snow forever loses Charming in her pursuit to get together with him, and Grumpy forever loses one of his brothers in the pursuit of them to save him. The connection between Snow and the dwarves at the end would feel much more powerful and much more connective, and we get rid of the whole generic thing about stealing a diamond for a girl. But hey, that's just my 2 cents. Look, let's just wrap this episode up by going back to the A-plot. David and Mary Margaret realize they can't be around each other because it's just simply too dangerous, so they begin to break up their routine. Mary Margaret doesn't go to the diner at 7:15 anymore, and David stays home with his wife to, you know, get to know her a little better and just be around her. It's a good enough way to end it, but of course that's not how we're gonna end it because we need more soap opera drama. As it turns out, both of them then arrive at Granny's at the same time, again, completely by mistake. They get frustrated since it seems like some invisible force is driving them together despite everything telling them to be apart, and then they kiss. Obviously they're gonna kiss. Look, at least we're moving in a direction. And just as a spicy little note, Regina does end up seeing this and hey! I forgot Regina was even in this show. You know, one of the best characters, the main antagonist, what was she doing this whole episode? Oh, but we're not done yet because we gotta get one last scene in the B-plot where it turns out Charming breaks off his engagement and goes hunting for Snow. Even though Snow said in no uncertain terms that she does not like him. And I know that because of dramatic irony, we're supposed to swoon for this moment, and it is pretty sweet. The problem is that from Charming's perspective, he is not honoring her wishes. From his perspective, she told him that she does not love him. That is very crystal clear, and he is going against her wishes to pursue her. The story paints it as very romantic, but in real life, this can be very problematic. because this is how you can get incels. He doesn't directly say it, but he gives off a lot of "I do not accept your rejection" energy, which is very dangerous. Luckily, the episode does end off on a really cool cliffhanger where Grumpy's running through his house trying to tell Snow the good news that Charming isn't getting married, but then it turns out...
Who?
Look, is this more romantic soap opera bullshit? Yes. Do I kinda like it? Also, yes. I just think it's kind of stupid, but it's like entertainingly stupid. Yeah, I warned you at the start of this episode. This episode is really bad, but I don't really think it's a 1 anymore. I think I talked myself into giving it like a 2 or a 3. Snow and Charming's confrontation is really good, and I do like the cliffhanger ending. Plus, all of the actors are just given their all in this episode. Season 1, episode 11. Fruit of the Poisonous Tree. This episode opens up as we get to see the aftermath of the storm that hit in the previous episode. Henry and Emma go to his castle, you know, the little playground, to see it almost completely destroyed. Henry then goes digging for something, and it turns out this is where he's stashed the storybook so that Regina can't get to it. But guess who pulls up just in time? Regina and Emma have another one of their confrontations, which is kind of getting boring by this point. Look, again, this 3-way dynamic is still the best part of the entire show, but it's not really evolving in any way. I mean, every single one of Regina and Emma's conversations is just kind of the same thing. Regina's just like, "He's not your son," and Emma's like, "Why do you hate me?" This dynamic is fine, but I'm getting really tired of it by this point. Luckily, in the next scene, we get to see Emma is going to be paired up with a different character for this episode.
My name is Gustavo, but you can call me Sus.
Gustavo Fring over here is drunk and irritated because Regina fired him for failing the sheriff race.
You are done. Fired.
A very pissed off Emma entertains the idea of working with Sydney to try to take down Regina for all of the evil things that she's done, you know, show everybody her true colors. And with that, we move to the B plot, where we see that this is going to be a pretty heavily Gus-focused episode. Okay, I'll stop referring to him as his Breaking Bad character. I'm sorry, it's low-hanging fruit. We see Sydney inside of a lamp, and we realize pretty quickly he's the genie from Aladdin. He's picked up by a strange man who rubs the lamp, and then a very tired Sydney offers him 3 wishes, but this guy, clearly a king and a royal, doesn't really want for anything, so he doesn't know what to do, and this pisses off Sydney. The genie laments about all of his years of servitude and how he's had to watch so many people make their wishes and ultimately regret them. Because this king is an absolute based unit, he uses his first wish to wish for the genie's freedom, and then his second wish to give his third and final wish to the genie. The genie is overwhelmed with happiness and says that he's ready to go on a journey to try to find true love, and the king takes that as an opportunity to lead him back to his castle where we see his daughter is. Oh, and his wife is over here. Something tells me this king guy isn't really going to get much of a happy ending by the end of this episode. The setup for the B plot done, we go back to the A plot, where we see Henry and Emma going back to his castle, only to see it being completely demolished by Regina because she's a little piece of shit. Again, this goes back to the whole Regina being uncharacteristically antagonistic throughout so much of this season. This is just such a stupid and petty and vindictive thing to do against your own son. Henry doesn't really care about the castle all that much, but he does go looking for his book, which turns out is missing. With all of this bad juju in the air now, Emma finally decides to call Sydney and take a bump on his offer to try to do something about Regina. And you know what? I'm actually feeling this episode a fair bit. I like that it's focusing on Emma, and I also like that it's focusing on Emma with somebody we haven't seen her paired up with yet. Again, a story like this really needs unconventional pairings like Sydney and Emma, and I mean, Giancarlo Esposito is just an amazing actor. He sells every single cheesy line of dialogue in this episode. And the stuff with Henry is really nice and intriguing too. I'm really just feeling this episode. I don't think there's anything that could... I'm just gonna skip. Keep skipping. Just keep skipping. Get past all of this. Get back to the, you know, stuff that matters. Emma and Sydney then meet under a bridge. Like, why do you have to go here? You could have just like gone to your house or the office or something. It's like weird like crime noir thing where you have to like meet in a dark alley somewhere. It's fucking in the middle of Maine. Sydney and Emma talk about their plan while he's dressed up like the yellow guy in Curious George. I'm sorry I'm laughing, but this stuff is just kind of funny. And look, I'm not trying to make fun of the show here. I think this is intentionally supposed to be funny. It makes it more enjoyable, okay? I'm not laughing at the show. I'm laughing with the show. They try to look into some bogus money transactions that are going on with Regina. Apparently she's moving funds around without anyone really knowing about it, so there's a lot of suspicious stuff going on. Sydney suggests planting a bug and maybe going through her computer, but Emma wants to do this by the book because, you know, she's kind of the sheriff, even though Mary Margaret has some interesting insight to throw into this argument.
I mean, maybe you're doing something wrong, but if it's what's meant to be, if it's what's right, does that really make you a bad person?
Honey, you're a homewrecker. They're trying to expose mayoral fraud. These are not the same. Emma and Sydney then go to the mayor's office to try to confront her about this and get some information out, but Regina remains as standoffish and stoic as ever. However, before they're leaving, Emma does plant a bug under Regina's desk and agrees with Sydney that they need to be a bit more unorthodox with how they bring Regina to justice, and I'm sure this won't backfire on her in any way. Then we move back to the B plot where we get to see the king's court as the genie observes him, clearly showing preference for his daughter Snow as opposed to his wife Regina, who goes out into the courtyard and is followed by the genie, and she makes a kind of weird comment about the tree that doesn't really feel very Regina-like.
Something in common. Neither of us can leave the palace, and neither of us truly belongs.
Normally, I wouldn't have much to say about this scene because it's kind of just weird faux romantic soap opera bullshit where the genie waxes poetically about how beautiful Regina is, but this scene is charged with a very interesting energy. And that's because Regina isn't really Regina in this scene. Her body language, the way she carries herself, the way that she speaks, it doesn't seem like the Regina that we know, and this could be for two reasons. Either this is before she became the evil queen, so she's less evil by definition, or something else is going on. Something a bit more deceptive. Back in the A-plot, Sydney and Emma listen to the bug and uncover Regina doing some sort of shady dealing in the woods, so they drive out to confront her, but...
Emma?
It won't stop.
Yeah, so they crash and eventually run into Mr. Gold, who it turns out was doing some sort of a land exchange agreement to Regina, and Regina was paying in the government's money. Which isn't strictly speaking illegal, but Emma needs more hard evidence, so she decides to break into the mayor's house. And I mean, yeah, it is extreme, but I do really like this one line from Emma.
Who does the alarm system alert? The police. I'm the police. 2 minutes for her to get a call from the alarm company, 1 minute to get her code and keys.
3 minutes to drive here. We got maybe 6 minutes.
We get inside the office and look around for some sort of blueprints or any hard evidence to help with their case, but Emma reveals she's not actually here for that.
Looking for Henry's book.
We didn't come here for Henry. We came here for
No,
the files.
you didn't come here for Henry. Me, that's the only reason I'm here.
That's just cute. Like can I just say that that's cute and I just like it. They are able to find some schematics and blueprints, but are interrupted by Regina when she arrives. With that, we go back to the B plot where we get to see the king confronts the genie about Regina having some sort of affair with some strange man who gave her a gift in the form of a mirror. Kind of like that gift that the genie gave to Regina just the other night. Apparently in Regina's diary, she said that this man has taken her heart like no other, and now the king needs the genie to try to figure out who it is. That's just really bad luck, I'll admit. The genie says he'll do it, but then in the next scene, we see Regina's father approach him with a box that's apparently for Regina. According to him, Regina's been locked in her room by the king. And as one of the king's closest confidants, the genie has the ability to go deliver this to her, and it'll apparently save her. He's eventually able to get it to her, and it turns out what's inside the box is actually 2 snakes that are apparently native to Agrabah. Regina contemplates killing herself because her life is so miserable, but then the genie is able to come up with a different idea.
What if the king didn't live?
Okay, yeah, that's it. I take back every compliment I might have thrown this guy's way. This is not how you be a bro. Just to be clear, I don't overly hate this plot line, mostly because it's painting unhealthy relationships as unhealthy, but we'll get to this later when we get to the end of the episode. After this, we go on a bit of a side quest where we see the Jughead Jones guy is hanging out at Granny's Diner with Henry. Why is he spending so much time around kids? This isn't looking okay. They talk about Henry's storybook, and he seems genuinely sad to hear that it's gone, but also entertains the whole fairy tale and real world idea with a lot of realism. It almost seems like he believes him, which, again, as I alluded to before, is a good position to put Henry in, since it's something he's never really experienced before. With that over with, we go back to the A-plot, where we see Regina's holding a town meeting where Emma stands up to accuse her of using the land that she purchased to build like a new house or something based on the blueprints that they stole. And what follows is a scene that's genuinely pretty hard to watch, and I mean that in a good way. Regina one-ups Emma by saying that the plans were to reveal a new playground that they were planning on building, and that she was buying the land in secret because she wanted to surprise her son, yada yada yada. It's very embarrassing and, again, hard to watch. Regina then follows Emma out and insults her, and while this would normally be just another one of their confrontations, it is charged with an interesting energy because Emma really can't stand up for herself.
Let's say, hypothetically, I'm a Barbie girl. Okay, let's even say I'm in a Barbie world.
Normally, their confrontations always go the same, with Emma not really giving in to whatever threats or insults Regina is throwing her way, but this time she was publicly humiliated in front of the entire town, so she really can't say anything back. Fast forward, and we see Henry and a bunch of kids playing on this playground that looks like a Rube Goldberg machine. How is this safer than the other place? I mean, motherfucker, those are just spikes. Those are just spikes sitting out there. Why are those important to the architectural design? Henry and Emma have a long-distance conversation with their walkie-talkies where Emma reveals that she's gonna have to stay away from him for a little bit because of his mom. This is just a really good way of breaking up the status quo, as now, for the next couple of episodes, Emma and Henry kinda can't be together, so we gotta force them to be a part of different characters' relationships. In a long-running serialized show like this, breaking up the status quo is very important. That's why I talk about pairing up different characters. Giving us new things is very important, since we can kind of get tired of the same dynamics over and over again. With that, we go back to the B-plot, where we get to see the genie putting the snakes in the king's bed, and then he gets poisoned, and there's a really somber tone to this scene. As it turns out, this is how the king died in the previous episode, and I do like a good bit of poetic irony. When the genie met the king, he said that every single time somebody used their wishes, it always led to something bad happening to them, because wishes always take something as payment. Magic always comes with a price, you know what they say. And so the king's wish to free the genie is what directly resulted in the genie killing him. Sure, Regina was gonna try to find some other way to kill him in Snow, but it's still a nice amount of poetic irony. Oh yeah, and it turns out in the next scene we see that this whole entire episode was just one big scheme by Regina to get the genie to kill the king. She never loved him, and like I said before, everything in this episode was just deception on Regina's part, which is really cool. She went on her full Saul Goodman arc and killed him using snakes that are found in Agrabah so that everybody would know that the genie was the one that killed him and he'd get blamed for it instead of her. However, right when it looks like she's about to dispatch of the genie uses his third and final wish to make one big wish.
I wish to be with you forever, to look upon your face always, to never leave your side.
Looks like you got your wish. You will be with me. Forever.
Yeah, so this isn't really a reveal because we've seen the magic mirror in previous episodes, but you'd be forgiven for not noticing because they never really focus on his face. But yeah, that's how the B-plot ends. The genie's now in the magic mirror and will always be with Regina forever. With that, we have to wrap up the A-plot, where we see Emma and Sydney drinking together, and even though they are pretty sad about losing, they both agree that they can still be partners in this thing, which would be a pretty sweet scene if there wasn't one last scene in this episode.
Have a seat, Sydney.
Got yourself an ally.
We won't get fooled again. She bought it.
All of it. Fucking
Yep, the big twist of the episode was that Sydney and Regina were working together the whole time and were trying to get Emma into a position where she could potentially embarrass herself and just kind of ruin her life. After all, the genie in the flashback did say he would always be with Regina no matter what, so this is really just sticking with character. And again, I like this because it's clearly an unhealthy and unbalanced relationship, but it's presented as such. Sydney has an unhealthy attachment to Regina, and Regina exploits that attachment for her own gains. And deconstructing this episode, you realize that's kind of what the whole episode and their relationship is about. I also like this episode ends on a sad and kind of depressing note. As the mid-season break begins after this episode, it's good to end on a defeat here, kind of, Empire Strikes Back-ish. And overall, I just really like this episode. It's a good break from the status quo of the show so far. It changes the status quo in very nice ways, and I think Giancarlo Esposito gives a really good performance as he just really sells this kind of pathetic character. I'll say it again, this show works when it's doing non-standard fairy tale things. And the genie having an obsessive relationship around the evil queen that causes him to destroy everything else in his life, you know what? That's non-standard. 8 out of 10. I really wish Giancarlo Esposito would stay in this show longer. Hey, so thanks for staying this long. This is a very long video, and I'm only halfway done with the first season. I apologize. I didn't exactly mean for this to be that long. I thought I would do the entire season in like an hour. I wanted to get this all done before the holidays, so I've kind of been speed editing through all of this. Thank you regardless, and I still have plans to finish season 1, but after that, if this doesn't get a lot of reception, I might try something else. I just kind of wanted to talk about the show as I was rewatching it, and I found this process to be very fun. Either way, go do the standard YouTube things. I don't know. I gotta go to bed. This is very tiring to talk about. And go watch Kraven the Hunter. It's like a 2 out of 10, but my god is it hilarious.
Slight meat back on the menu, boys!